What is up, guys? Welcome to the Nest Podcast. This is episode 117, and I'm your host, Brandon. Joining me is my co host, Zach. And Zach, we are here, and we normally come on here and we talk exclusively sports. We talk nothing about sports because that's kind of what we know and love. But sometimes there's stuff that's going on in the world that warrants us to talk about. It warrants our attention a little bit. And of course, I'm talking not about the election or anything like that. I'm talking about Sean Connery passed away this week. And as a big Bond fan, that impacted me directly because I remember, watching all of these old Bonds where Sean Connery was the man, and then watching as it went to Timothy Dalton and then to, now Daniel Craig and all that. Of course, I notably skipped over one on purpose, but it is what it is. But Sean Connery passing away, that was kind of a big deal and kind of came as a shock, even though the man was 90 years old. So what did you think about that? Do you have any Sean Connery memories or things that you would like to talk about?
I clearly just know of him as the original James Bond, and he's almost kind of personified that character as who he is as a person. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously a huge just celebrity in his own right, and I didn't really realize how old he was. So when he died, it kind of came as a shock, like, oh wow, that guy has been around a long time.
Yeah, I know a lot of people might remember the Sean Connery character from the SNL sketches as well. It was kind of a funny little mock of him as a person, but he was a cool guy, and it sucks that he's gone. 2020 took one more away from us, and he's not a sports hero that we normally talk about that's passed away, but he was one of my personal favorites. Of course, being the original James Bond was a huge deal. I actually try to do a Bondathon every 5 years or so and watch all of the Bonds in like a long weekend. So I'll
Mhm.
have to do that again pretty soon, now in his memory, so to say.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, week 8 just happened. Week 8 transpired, and we've got a lot to talk about that happened there. We had some great football games, for what it's worth, and we had some extracurricular activities on the football field that we've got to get into as well. But first, I want to kick things off talking about the Bills beating the Patriots. The Patriots have now lost 4 games in a row. It seems like since the coronavirus impacted the New England Patriots, they've not been the same. So I I don't know, man. It seems like they've been on a skid, but the games that they've lost, they've been pretty close, pretty competitive games. I mean, they lost to the Seahawks by, they could have won it on a last second touchdown that got stopped. They lost to the Chiefs without Cam Newton. They've lost to now the Bills on, again, a last minute play when they could have won. So I don't really think it's all doom and gloom. I don't think they're throwing up the white flags just yet, but I do think that coronavirus made them slow down a little bit.
Yeah, you can tell it definitely just kind of completely interrupted their flow. I think Cam Newton was really doing his thing there at the beginning of the season, and this just really halted everything. And as we've mentioned before, the Patriots had a significant number of opt outs, and I think you can see that that's affecting them. Their
Yeah,
depth just isn't there with certain positions.
most notably on the defense, they've had a lot of those opt outs. And we were talking with our good buddy Adam before we came on in a text thread, and he was saying that, Cam Newton's kind of been exposed as being one dimensional. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe. And I looked it up, and Cam Newton actually ranks 32nd in the league right now for passing touchdowns. He only has 2 passing touchdowns on the entire season. The rest of his touchdowns have been rushing. So, I mean, maybe he is that glorified running back that everybody proclaims that Lamar Jackson is. Cam Newton maybe doesn't have the arm that he once did in Carolina.
Yeah, it's possible. You also have to think that, I mean, it's not like he has a star-studded wide receiver core to throw to.
That's
So
true. Yeah, and I mean that was ultimately what was the decline of Tom Brady in New England as well. Is just the wide receiver crew hasn't been top notch. I mean, Julian Edelman can only do so much.
yeah,
N'Keal Harry is a first round draft pick that really hasn't come into his own as a professional yet. it'll be interesting to see how the draft shakes up this year, because I don't anticipate that the Pats are going to end up with the 30th overall pick again like they normally do, and they'll be somewhere in the middle of the road. Maybe they can actually start to get some of these good offensive players that are going to be slipping down into like the middle of the draft because everybody's so hungry for these top tier quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't really remember or realize is that, for basically 20 years, the Patriots have been at the bottom end of the draft order, which means it's a lot harder to bolster your roster and get that new young talent because all the good players are going to the crappy teams.
Yep.
And after a while, after your star guy leaves or retires, there's a transition period there where obviously they relied heavily on Tom Brady slinging the rock to some no-name wide receiver and making plays. Now that whole game plan is out the window, and Cam Newton's whole thing is to scramble and make plays happen with his feet. It's a whole new ball game now in New England, and I think it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment period for them to just kind of find their footing and to get the right pieces. But like you, I don't think it's sound the alarms.
Right. They've been close enough in games that they're going to win some games. They're going to beat the Jets again. They're going to be able to be competitive and possibly beat the Dolphins again, which, speaking of the Dolphins and speaking of teams that have had earlier draft picks that they've gotten to get stars and build around those stars, Tua made his first start as a member of the Miami Dolphins. And, for what it's worth, they got the win. Maybe not so much because of Tua, because that defense was incredible yesterday. The defense ended up with 2 interceptions. One of them was a pick six. They got 2 fumble recoveries, and they got a punt return for a touchdown. So Tua didn't really have to do too much. He did end up throwing for his first touchdown, though, so that was kind of cool.
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, that's a formidable team. I don't think that many people expected them to beat the Rams, but they did. And he made his debut, and it could have been a lot worse. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it could have been terrible. It could have been a disaster, but there's kind of like a weird little connection now that Tua will always have with Dan Marino. Dan Marino, of course, the most famous Dolphins quarterback of all time, made his first start on the day before Halloween against the LA Rams. Tua makes his first start on the day after Halloween against the LA Rams. So there's a weird little connection. And, for Dolphins fans, I'm sure they're sitting there salivating, hoping that means he's going to be the next Dan Marino. I don't know. I know our boy Jared El Prez over at Sportszilla is definitely happy to see that the Dolphins have been winning.
Yeah, for sure. I remember maybe a week ago or maybe less, he posted in Sportszilla saying that, basically, when are we going to start taking these Dolphins seriously? I mean, they're in second place right now. It seems like that division is Buffalo's to lose, but anything can happen. I mean, I think it was a bold move to just outright name Tua the starter over Fitzpatrick, who's having a good season, but that's what they've decided to do, and we'll see what they can do. They don't have a terrible team like they normally do.
I've said it once, I'll say it again. If I'm the Dallas Cowboys, I'm on the phone right now with the Dolphins trying to get Fitzpatrick. But I don't think that's going to happen because the Dolphins don't want to let him go. If you noticed during that game, anytime Tua went to the sidelines, he immediately found Fitzpatrick. They were sitting there looking at the iPads, looking at the photos, looking at everything on there to try to make sure that he's doing the right thing. Fitzpatrick's being a great mentor, whether he's heartbroken about not starting or not.
Yeah. And I think this is a good place for him to be, because I think it's a little too late in his career for him to be the guy.
Mm-hmm.
If he can be just one of those guys that gets paid to basically mentor the young kid, that's a great way to end your career. He's going to get paid a millions of dollars to teach somebody how to play professional football, basically.
To basically be a personal coach.
Yeah. I mean, I would hang my hat on that and be cool with that any day of the week.
Yeah. And he's got a great beard, so you can't even be mad at the guy.
Absolutely.
So Sunday's fight of the week wasn't anything from the UFC or the world of boxing. It actually happened from the NFL. Of course, by now, I'm sure most of our listeners are aware of the fight that took place during the middle of the Bears and New Orleans Saints game. For those that are watching, I've got it queued up right here. We're going to go ahead and take a peek at that fight and we're going to dissect how it all kind of happened and broke down. So, our viewers can see it, but play that's happening, and the Bears complete a pass. They're short of the first down, whatever. And then over on the other side of the field, a melee starts to ensue. You're going to see in a replay in just a moment how it gets started. And what it is the Saints, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, got sucker punched by the Bears' Javon Wims. He rips out his mouthpiece, throws 2 punches right at his face. Then they get into a little tussle or whatever and get pulled apart. Wims jumps out of there like he's celebrating because he thinks the penalty is going to be on them or whatever. But clearly he was the instigator. Clearly he came up and just started throwing punches.
Yeah.
You're seeing it right now.
That was pretty egregious, I would say. I mean, the story is, from what I've heard, that the Saints player spit on Wims allegedly, and that's what basically kicked off that whole fight. But I mean, Jesus Christ, that was a lot.
Yeah, it was a little much. It's football. Tempers flare, people get a little bit upset, but there's no need for any of that. Like you said, it did start earlier in the game with another little tussle or whatever. It actually started on, I believe it was the first play that the Bears had in the second half. So they came out after halftime, they got the ball or whatever, and they were running some plays, getting ready to run some plays. And Chauncey Gardner-Johnson ripped Wims's mouthpiece out of his mouth and threw it on the ground. Of course, Wims wasn't so happy about that, but he got subbed out. So he was sent to the sidelines. The Bears ended up getting a delay game. They ended up getting sacked, had to punt the ball. So then the Saints had their entire drive. And then that play that we just watched was the very first time that Wims was back on the field. So let's take a look here at this play. This happened before the fight, and let's see if we can catch Chauncey Gardner-Johnson instigating before the actual event took place.
Here's Montgomery with a cutback. Mario Davis is in there to make the stop for New Orleans, a gain of 1.
All right, you're going to see it right in here.
Well, they got
yeah, you saw him rip his.
Was a jugs machine.
So yeah, you can clearly see that he ripped the mouthpiece out while they were sitting there jaw jacking back and forth, talking a little bit. So Wims got sent to the sidelines, and he was just sitting there stewing for what was 11 real-time minutes. He didn't forget. That dude held the grudge for 11 minutes waiting to go back out there, rip his mouthpiece out, and then throw a punch right at his face. I understand being upset. That's a disrespectful move on the part of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but that is no way that you need to be retaliating. You just cost yourself in getting kicked out of that game, and the NFL came down and suspended Wims for 2 games now.
Yep.
So now you're not even going to get to play for the next 2 weeks. However, I do think the NFL needs to take a look at that clip that we just showed and, maybe reassess and give Chauncey Gardner-Johnson a suspension as well for instigating.
Yeah, definitely. Both parties are guilty there. But on the part of Wims, I think that could have been handled during play. If you square up with that guy and you end up going, if he's a lead blocker or whatever, then you handle your business during playtime. And I think players can do that and do that. It's the stuff that's between the whistles is what gets you in trouble. Obviously, this is one of those cases. They're not going to just let you get away with that. They may or may not let you get away with some roughness if a play is actually happening. But when the whistle blows, that you can't do anything, and that's just egregious, and it sucks. He was definitely instigated, but I would not say that that's the way you should handle that.
No, but it does seem like Gardner-Johnson is a bit of a hothead anyway. If you remember back a few weeks ago, there was the rumors and then confirmed that Michael Thomas had punched a player in practice, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the guy that he punched in practice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the guy tends to get a little bit maybe emotional, or maybe he's just a hothead, kind of a jerk or whatever it is, and he runs his mouth. And a lot of these guys don't want to hear you running your mouth, especially if you're reaching up and grabbing their mouthpiece out of their mouth and, taunting them or doing whatever it is that you're doing. And it's
Right.
funny, on the broadcast, Joe Buck and Troy Aikman actually noticed and commented on the fact that the mouthpiece was laying on the field for about 3 extra plays. So it was laying there for a long time and people were noticing it. So
Wow. And I mean, you got to think this is a high adrenaline sport as it is. These guys are full of testosterone, legal or illegal, and it does not take much to set them off. And this is what they do. People try to get in your head. Jalen Ramsey is famous for that. He trash talks the wide receivers that are on the other side of the field of him. It's just something that goes on in this sport. And if you let it get the best of you, this is what happens. Sure, you might have got your licks on that guy, but now you're suspended, and you're probably going to get a fine of some sort. And for what? So you could show him that you're a bigger man. You could have done that during play.
yeah, I agree. It was stupid. And, ultimately his team is the ones that are going to have to suffer because of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the only undefeated team in the NFL. And of course, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They survived yet another close encounter. This week, it was against the Ravens, which I thought was going to be a much better matchup. The Ravens, we talk about it all the time, have a great offense, and they usually are able to put up points at will. But against that Steelers defense, they were pretty much stifled for the entire game. The Steelers ended up getting 2 interceptions and picking up 2 fumbles off the ground. So that defense carried them yet again because Big Ben didn't have that great of a game. It was pretty normal, really. He threw for 182 yards with 2 touchdowns in the win. He did enough, and that's all he's had to do this season is just do enough to win, and the defense is going to be able to hold them down. That's how you win Super Bowls, is having a decent offense and a good defense, and the Steelers seem to have it all together right now.
Right. I mean, from what the Steelers produced last year to what they're doing now is night and day. If you would have told me at the beginning of this season that the Steelers were going to go undefeated up until this point, that would have been hard to believe because Ben was just coming off of an injury. He's old. Sure, he might have some talent, but we didn't know what Claypool was going to do. And, James Conner didn't have a great season last year. This team is really killing it. And it's pretty surprising for me to see how well they're doing with an old Big Ben. And, their defense, from what I can remember, hasn't been touted as one of the best, but here they are, like you said, they're winning games for them. It's crazy to see.
Yeah, it's obviously the big difference from last season to this season is the fact that they have Big Ben and they have a competent quarterback. Last year they kind of struggled because all they had was James Conner in the backfield, and he got hurt off and on all season long. So it never was an established run game. They knew they didn't have a quarterback that could sit back there and sling the rock. So it was a very one-dimensional offense and really easy to stop whenever you get that one dimension. So this year, you've got to respect the passing game. Juju's a good wide receiver, even though he hasn't really been balling out. But that's opened the door for, like you said, Chase Claypool to have good games. And some of the other guys on that wide receiving core, plus Connor, has been able to get off and do his thing. And it's made their offense more dynamic. You don't know which one to stop. And then whenever their defense is balling out like that, it's definitely hard to give up on them.
Yeah, it's crazy to see what a good quarterback can do for young, talented wide receivers. I mean, last year, everyone will remember that Juju was not a very good player to have on your fantasy team. And this year, he's a solid choice. I mean, it's crazy to see the level in productivity rise with like you said, Big Ben isn't out there balling, but he's doing well, and it's really crazy to see just the level of just pure, almost. I don't know. It's like that whole team is one whole unit. You can tell. And like last year, it was not that, and they had their missing piece removed, and now it's put back in, and they're clicking. It's crazy.
Mike Tomlin, the Steelers coach, just passed Tony Dungy on the all-time wins list for African American coaches.
Oh
So
wow,
that's significant feather in his cap as well. So I wanted to give a shout out for that. But you had Juju on your team last year, didn't you?
it was terrible.
That's why you remember that so vividly.
Yeah, it was awful. I think he was my number 2 pick, if I remember
Mm.
correctly.
Yeah, that hurt last year because he did not put up any numbers. So last week, the Titans suffered their first loss at the hands of those Steelers. And then this week, they turned around and dropped a second consecutive game, but this time to the 2-5-1 Cincinnati Bengals. We've been talking for a few weeks now that Joe Burrow and company has, they've been close. They've been so close to winning some of these games that they've lost. Twice to the Browns, they lost by one possession games. They nearly won against the Lions. Now they finally put a win together against a solid team. Are the Bengals going to be a team that we have to look out for in the future?
Absolutely. I think as long as they don't shit their pants, and if they can get some pieces for Joe Burrow, they've got something. I mean, this is a Titans team that a couple weeks ago we were saying was a juggernaut. I mean, the way that Derrick Henry was running and the way that Ryan Tannehill was playing, you would have thought that they'd be the ones that were undefeated right now. I don't know what's going on in Nashville there, but I don't know. They're not the same team. I don't know what's going on, because it's not like that was a close game. The Bengals came out and won that game definitively.
It helps that Gostkowski missed a field goal early and kind of set them on a downward spiral for a little bit. But that dude's been trash all season, and I've got him on my fantasy team now. So, whoopee, I need to replace him.
Yep.
Kickers make a difference, man. Koo from the Falcons posted double-digit points yet again. Some of these kickers are out there having big weeks every week. The Cowboys, that's all they get is field goals these days. So.
Right. Yeah. And that kid with those big black frame glasses from Georgia that plays for I don't even remember, but he's been killing it too.
Yeah, there are a few good kickers in the league, so hopefully I can find one that at least is serviceable and gets 7 to 10 points every week, but we'll see. See what's on the waivers this week.
Yep. Blankenship. That's what I was talking about.
Blankenship. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Also in that Cincinnati Bengals game, Giovanni Bernard turned back the hands of time, just like we turned back our clocks, and he put up 2 total touchdowns, had about 150 total yards of offense, 20-something fantasy points this week for a guy that came in to essentially replace Joe Mixon. So that was a huge, huge addition off the bench for them. So that I look for them to use Giovanni Bernard going forward a lot more, because he's a better pass catcher out of the backfield. And Joe Burrow really needs that check down option, because the Bengals offensive line can't really hold for too long.
Yeah.
So having that running back that can just leak out and catch a pass, get 5 to 10 yards or whatever it is, that's a huge addition to that offense. It opens it up downfield for guys like T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. AJ Green's still pretty much been a non-factor.
Right.
So, and your boy Sample is still a non-factor, huh?
Yeah, he's on my bench.
He finally got benched.
Yeah, Jared Cook finally got healthy, so he's back in.
Gotcha. Now, we mentioned briefly that the Cowboys, all they kick are field goals. They got 3 of them this past prime time on Sunday night. When is the NFC going to realize that when is the NFL going to realize, rather, that the NFC East is not primetime football?
I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking there. I guess they thought that at the beginning of the season, or whenever they make that TV schedule, that Dak was going to just be able to light up the scoreboard, and it was going to be a nice game to watch. But obviously that didn't happen. I mean, that Dallas team is terrible. And I mean, it's not like the Eagles came out and absolutely killed it. Carson Wentz had a terrible game, but it was still enough to beat Dallas. So yeah, that was a game that should have been on at noon or 1 o'clock, not prime time.
Here's what bothers me about what you said, Zach, about them scheduling it, in the preseason or before the season started. They've showed this season through COVID and all that stuff that they can be flexible with their TV scheduling. They can move games around with a very, very short notice. So if you know that it's going to be a suck fest of a game, why keep it there? Why not put the Seahawks and 49ers on there, which was a good game? Why not put the uh, Vikings and the Packers, which was a good game? Why not put those games on prime time and then shift this one down to like the 4 o'clock slot or the 1 o'clock slot? It makes no sense to me. They have the ability to shift these games around. They could call them up on Tuesday or Wednesday the week before and be like, hey, I know you guys are supposed to play at 8 o'clock on Sunday, but guess what? You suck, so you're playing at 1.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point. Maybe they think that the Cowboys are still America's team and that they get national attention. But I think that's only true if they're winning. If the Cowboys suck, people just shit on them all day. I mean, it's not like anyone's out there other than regular Cowboys fans. It's not like anyone's out there, singing their praises. So I agree. This was a weird decision to have such a terrible game on for prime time. They didn't ask me my opinion.
Yeah, obviously. In the last game that Dak Prescott got to play an entire fourth quarter, he scored 24 points with the Cowboys offense. In the 3 games since he's been injured, the Cowboys have scored less than 24 points total.
It's fucking insane. I mean, this has to just provide ammo for his case to get paid. Look at what his team has done without him. I mean, that has to say just how valuable he is to that team. Whether that team wants to pay for that value or not, I think someone will.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in our fantasy booms and bust segments because I've got something to talk about there. Just rattling off some more throughout the rest of the league. The Vikings upset the Packers, which was a huge shock to me. Dalvin Cook coming back was a huge shot of momentum to the Vikings. So we'll get more into that in a little bit. The Broncos were able to outlast the Chargers. Justin Herbert still playing good ball, but had a few turnover issues. So it is what it is. He's a rookie. It's going to happen. But the Broncos were able to hold him off, which, good for them, good on them or whatever. And good for them to be able to score 30-plus points with their ragtag team that they've got.
Right.
The Seahawks got back on the winning column against the 49ers. 49ers have been hot, cold here lately. So who knows what you're going to get out of them each week. This week you got the colder variety. So it is what it is with the 49ers. The Colts handled the Lions pretty handedly, and the Chiefs steamrolled the Jets. Of course, everyone saw that one coming.
Yeah, no surprise there.
Speaking of the Jets, we were talking again with Adam before we went on, and I already had this little segment planned before we had the little text conversation, but it just kind of fed in perfectly to what I wanted to talk about. And I want to talk about the tanking teams, the teams out there that everyone has perceived that they are tanking this season for Trevor or failing for Fields or whatever clever little acronym and saying you want to put on there. But there are right now several teams that have 2 or less wins through week 8. So pretty trash records, if we're being honest. Of course, the Jets are far and away the worst team in the league at 0-8 right now. They have a real legitimate shot at going 0 for 16 on the entire season. That would make them the 3rd team in NFL history to do so. Right now, they have 94 points scored for their team throughout those 8 games, and they've given up 238 points. So they're just getting steamrolled every single week. Would they take Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields? And if they do, what becomes of Sam Darnold? Is he the next Josh Rosen where he gets bounced around?
That's a great question. I don't see why they wouldn't. it doesn't seem like Sam Darnold is their answer. Granted, that place is just so screwed up that they could have any number of good players and probably still suck. But you've got to think that they're one of those teams that's just going to cycle out first round picks until they get one like Joe Burrow or something and finally make something happen. But I don't see them getting the first round pick and not picking Trevor Lawrence if he does end up going to the draft, or Justin Fields or one of those guys.
If that's the case, I wouldn't mind seeing Sam Darnold end up somewhere like the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags obviously are in need of a legitimate starting quarterback. They have some other pieces there. They just need that starting quarterback. And of course, the Jags are also on our list of tanking teams potentially. At 1-6, they're, right up there with the Jets of one of the worst records in the league. And Gardner Minshew has been mentioned that he's going to be out for the next few weeks at least, with broken bones and damaged ligaments and tendons in his throwing hand. So the Jags could end up being one of the front runners for a top pick. And if they don't get one of those quarterbacks that are out there and they happen to make a trade with the Jets to get Darnold, that means they could use that top tier pick to add somewhere else on their lineup, maybe get one of these linemen that are going to be coming out, or maybe get a running back or wide receiver. They just did release Leonard Fournette. He's off on to the Bucks now, so it looks like they've been able to fill him pretty well with what is it, Henderson, that's running for them right now. But I know they need some help at the wide receiver position as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Gardner Minshew is kind of one of those Ryan Fitzpatrick type players. He makes a splash every now and then, but he's just not consistent enough to be the guy. And I think Jacksonville knows that. And if they're smart, if they do fall to get one of these top picks, they should go after a young quarterback if they can't make a trade happen, because I think they need something just as much as any other team that's not doing so great.
Yeah. Another team that's sitting at 1-6 that I don't think would pick one of these top tier quarterbacks is a team that actually just paid a top tier quarterback, and that's the Houston Texans. They just paid Deshaun all that money, and if they end up with one of these top tier picks, you can definitely think that they're either going to trade that pick or that they would get something to bolster somewhere else on their team, maybe somewhere on the defense, maybe on that offensive line. And that could be a chance for one of these quarterbacks to slip a little bit further down the line.
That's true. Yeah. And I mean, that team is a dumpster fire in and of itself. They paid Deshaun and then took his weapons away. I don't know what they're planning on doing, but I could definitely see them doing that.
I mean, it wouldn't be that bad of a deal for them, honestly, to land one of these top spots. I'm sorry, it was James Robinson with the Jags. That was bothering me the whole time. I couldn't think of his name. James Robinson. He's the running back for the Jags this year. He's done great too, and that's why it was killing me that I couldn't remember it. But Deshaun, like he's a good quarterback, and he deserved to get paid, but you're right. They took away all of his toys, and you can't expect him to perform when he has nothing left. They've got Tunzel. They've got good people out on their line. They've got a good defense. I know they lost Clowney, but they still have J.J. Watt if he can stay healthy. They still have some other pieces on that defense that are worthwhile. Give them some targets. You use this draft pick that you're inevitably going to get that's going to most likely be a top 5 pick, top 10 at the worst, and get some targets. Get a good wide receiver for him, or trade that pick for a wide receiver that's ready to move on from their team. Maybe Amari Cooper's ready to leave the Cowboys or something like that. Who knows? Then we also have a gambit, like 4 or 5 teams that are at 2 wins. The Falcons, I don't think they're going to be looking for a new quarterback. The Vikings, maybe they are ready to move on from Kirk Cousins because they've got pieces everywhere else. They just have an inconsistent quarterback. The Chargers, I don't think they're looking for a new quarterback. And the Patriots, we talked about earlier, I think they're going to end up winning a few more games this season and be in the middle of the pack come draft time. So really the only teams that I see that are going to be in the contention or in the running for that first overall, second overall picks, the Jets, the Texans, the Jags, and the Giants.
Yep, I agree with that.
That will be your top 4 picks, in my opinion. Maybe not necessarily in that order, but pretty dang close. The Giants also at 1-6. They're playing the Bucks right now. We can pretty much assume they'll be 1-7 at the end of that one. Do they give up on Daniel Jones if they end up with one of these top picks and they go and get Fields or Lawrence?
Right.
It's the same issue that the Jets are facing. Do they give up on the quarterback that they have now and try to go after one of these young studs and hope that they can catch lightning in the bottle? I don't know.
Right. And at the same time, if one of those crappy teams gets the number 1 pick and Trevor Lawrence is slated to be that number 1 draft pick, does he just say, you know what, I'm going to do another year of college because I don't want to play for your terrible team?
The thing with that is you're turning down all this money. Like we just saw, how quickly an illness can happen and how, injuries happen every single week in college football. If you decide to stay when you could go get a guaranteed first overall pick paycheck and then you get hurt and then you see your stock slip down out of the top 10 or whatever, or say you go and you don't have a good season or whatever and your stock starts to drop, it's hard to walk away from that money. Even Dabo Sweeney, Trevor Lawrence's coach, has said that he expects to see him in the NFL next season. So I don't think he's going to walk regardless of who picks him. And if he's waiting on the Jets to be good, he'll have a PhD by the time that he's done. So
yeah, I think you're right ultimately, but I think if it were me, that thought would at least cross my mind. I don't think he's going to get any better of a team that's going to draft him next year. So you might as well just go out and get your money. Because like you said, anything can happen. And we've seen that this year. And as a matter of fact, Trevor himself tested positive for COVID-19 and had to miss this week. And he'll have to miss next week because he tested positive yet still on Thursday. And the NCAA's stipulations are that you have to quarantine for X amount of days after a positive test. So, if this happens to him and it's crunch time and he misses a good chunk of a season, and it might be from an injury or who knows what, it's definitely going to hurt his draft stock. And I'm sure that's going to cross his mind. And like you said, there's guaranteed money on the line, and it's going to be pretty hard for him to walk away from that.
Yeah. And, just to that point, missing against Boston College, maybe not such a big deal, but next week they play Notre Dame. And that's a team that could give the Clemson Tigers a big L. And when it comes down to the final seedings and stuff like that, that could play a huge factor in them, being a number 1 or a number 2 seed and who they end up facing overall, because ultimately it's going to be a matchup again somewhere along the way of Clemson and Bama. And if you end up playing them in the championship, so be it. If you end up playing them in one of the rounds of the playoffs and they beat you there, then you're going home sad.
Yep.
Yeah. I would rather at least make it to the championship than not.
Yep. 100%.
So it'll be interesting to follow that and see kind of what happens with the draft and, where all these teams line up. We talked about it, I think it was last week, that my dad pitched the idea to me that they should enter them into a lottery like the NBA does. I think that would be great. Take all these 6-7 teams that we just talked about, the teams that are 2 wins and less right now, throw them in a bucket, draw one out, and that's the team that gets the number 1 overall pick. Not only does that make it more exciting for the college players that would be drafted, maybe Trevor Lawrence in that scenario ends up on the Patriots. That would be cool for me, but it also makes it more interesting for all the fans because, your team doesn't have to outright tank. It doesn't have to lose every single game in order for you to have the chance at the number one pick. And the way it is right now, that's what has to happen.
Yeah. And I think from what I was talking about just now, it would take the questions out of it for the college player that's going to enter the draft.
Yep.
You don't have to sit there and say, do I really want to get drafted by the Jets? Because you have no idea who's going to end up picking you. You're just going to go into the draft and see what happens. So I think that could work. I don't foresee it happening anytime soon, but it could definitely work in the NFL.
No, I think it would definitely work in the NFL, but like you said, I don't think we see it happen anytime soon because Roger Goodell sucks.
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's talk about fantasy football. That's one of our favorite things to talk about on the show. One of the things that we enjoy the most, and something that I want to personally brag about is in our league, I just put the 1 in 7-1 because I got to knock off the only undefeated team in our league and sent Jerome home with a big frown on his face because he's not going to get to hang that undefeated season. So it is possible for a 5-3 team or 4-3 team to knock off a 7-0 team. I just did it, but without tooting my horn too much, it was his bye week for his quarterback, Kyler Murray, and he had a couple other byes. So maybe if he was full strength, it would have been a different story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to take your wins when you can get them in fantasy football.
That's it, man. I didn't make the schedule.
Right.
But let's go ahead and move into our fantasy booms and busts because we've got a few guys that we both agreed on before we came in here that were definite booms. And the first of those was quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes has been relatively quiet for several games this season, but on the games where he shows up, he has definitely showed up. And he showed up big time in week 8 with 36.64 points. He threw for 416 yards and 5 total touchdowns. This is exactly why it's frustrating to have a Chiefs running back on your team because he's always throwing the ball to wide receivers down the field. I know Tyreek Hill caught 2 of those touchdowns and caught a few big time deep bombs. So it sucks whenever you have the running back and he doesn't put up the big points like that. But hey, like I said earlier, I still got the W in fantasy, so I'm not too mad at Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yep.
And with Le'Veon Bell now getting some touches, that's really screwing up that, but it is what it is, I guess. We also talked about running back Dalvin Cook coming back for the Vikings. Dude dropped 48.6 points in fantasy. He had 163 yards rushing and 4 total touchdowns. That was a piece that the Vikings were definitely missing. You know, they're 2-5 on the season, but I think they're 2-2 when Dalvin Cook's on the field. So
yeah, that guy is an immediate impact player, and this just shows it. I mean, coming off of an injury and being able to do this 4 touchdowns. I mean, that is amazing, especially for your fantasy team.
that's the game that we expected Alexander, whatever his last name is. It's not Hamilton, but it's whatever. Alexander Madison. We expected him to have a good game, but he didn't even show up when it was his time to shine. Dalvin Cook came in and balled out.
Yep.
DK Metcalf, another good game for that guy. You know, I believe it was Stephen A. Smith compared him to Megatron and said that DK Metcalf is the new Megatron of the league. 40.1 fantasy points, 12 receptions for 161 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has definitely become Russell Wilson's favorite target.
And I mean, I'm still waiting for those test results to come back on that guy. Is he 100% human, or is there some sort of ridiculous DNA in there? Because that guy is unreal. From what we saw last week, he can run faster than a cheetah. I mean, he's absolutely in peak physical performance. He is just he can do everything. I mean, there was questions for his route running abilities, but Russell Wilson does not seem to care if he has any because, yeah, he's his favorite target, and this guy just is doing the damn thing out there.
Absolutely, man. And another guy that does the damn thing is Devontae Adams. He seems, since he's come back from his injuries, he's been putting up big numbers. And Aaron Rodgers definitely enjoys having his favorite target back. Adams dropped 30.3 points, 7 receptions, 53 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's a red zone target. This is a wide receiver one that gets targets in the red zone. Unlike Julio Jones down in Atlanta, the Packers know how to use a wide receiver one.
Right. Which is so interesting because the rest of that offense is basically non-existent. It's Aaron Rodgers and it's Davante Adams, and somehow they still can get Adams involved. It's kind of weird to see that, because that's the whole stipulation with Julio, is that he's always double teamed. Well, how in the hell do you not double team this Davante Adams and just completely put him out of the game, because he's basically Aaron Rodgers' only good target, and the Packers still seem to be able to do it.
Well, the answer to that, Zach, is because it's not just those two players. They also have Aaron Jones in there normally, who makes defenses stay honest, because he's a running back that can also catch out of the backfield. But if you're double teaming wide receivers, that's one less person that's going to be able to tackle a running back. And even since Aaron Jones has been injured, Jamal Williams has stepped up and filled those shoes. I've been the benefactor of that for 2 weeks in a row on my fantasy team, because I picked him up after reviewing my waiver wire Wednesdays. And I was like, you know what? This is a guy that needs to play. He's scored 20 plus points in the first game, and he scored 18 points this past week. So he's out there doing the thing, keeping defenses honest, making it so that Adams can get open. And like I said, they throw to him in the red zone. So what they do in the red zone is they stack the line of scrimmage, and they have so many different targets. You can't double team, because that would leave other people completely wide open. So Adams is able to get either in zone coverage or man-to-man coverage, and man-to-man coverage is not good because he can lose a guy quick.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, clearly decision making in Green Bay is a lot better than Atlanta, but that's a given.
That is a given. On the other side of the coin from our booms is, of course, the busts. And every week there is going to be someone who is a big time bust. And for the majority of the season, I'm going to have to say it's Lamar Jackson. Lamar, once again, is a bust. He only posted 14.82 fantasy points, which isn't terrible, but it's not up to the standards that fantasy owners expected from Lamar Jackson. In a lot of leagues, he was going in the first, second, third rounds. I know he went in the third round in our league. Lamar threw for 208 yards with 2 touchdowns, but he threw for 2 interceptions, and he lost both of those fumbles that we talked about earlier. In all, he fumbled 3 times, but the Ravens were able to recover one of them. So glorified running back, everybody that says that, he does take off a lot, and he has been stripped a lot here lately, especially this season. And in this game, the Steelers just ate him up.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if he's having some sophomore slump or something, but this is not the season that people thought he was going to have. Like you said, he was drafted very high in a majority of leagues. A guy like that is really not expected to do this. I wouldn't say bad, but he's not living up to the hype.
Right.
So in my opinion, that's a bust as well. A big bust for me is Carson Wentz. Obviously, he's not very high on many people's lists, but coming into this game against Dallas, they clearly don't have much of a defense. I kind of expected him to do pretty well, but
I did too.
He didn't. 8 points, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions, and I believe he had a fumble as well, if I'm not mistaken. So not a great game for him against a team that does not have a formidable defense at all.
Yeah, I actually came on my Sunday morning stardom and sit-ems and said that Carson Wentz is a guy you should consider starting, because of the fact they were playing the Cowboys and everybody balls out against the Cowboys. But Wentz, he didn't even crack 10 fantasy points this week, and it was because of the turnovers.
Right.
Plain and simple. If you lose the ball, you're going to lose points in fantasy, and that's not a good thing for your overall point totals.
For sure.
But speaking of those Cowboys, my running back and wide receiver busts of the week both come from the Dallas Cowboys. Zeke Elliott. This guy's been very quiet all season long. He's not been mentioned too many times on our show or in a lot of shows for that matter because he's been mediocre. Zeke posted 8.3 fantasy points and rushed for 63 yards. While that's not terrible, it's not what you expect out of a guy that got paid what he got paid. And this is a guy that has needed to step up since Dak got hurt, and he hasn't. Zeke is proving that he wasn't worth that money and that Dak had every right to be upset. And Dak probably should have gotten paid first.
Yeah, he's had a below average season, even with Dak. I mean, he has just not had a great season. I don't know what the deal is with that, but like you said, they paid him way too early. And I mean, good for him for getting his money, but they're gonna regret that because running backs don't last forever, clearly, and he's not worth the money this year for sure.
And another guy from the Cowboys, and I actually had him on my stardom situm as a guy you should just sit, is Amari Cooper. 1 reception for 5 yards, 1.5 fantasy points. He's another guy that got paid for the Cowboys and just has not produced. I know it's not ideal to have Ben DiNucci or Andy Dalton throwing him the ball, but star players should be able to get open and they should be able to produce. I would like to think that if guys like Michael Thomas or uh, Adams that we were talking about earlier, or even DK Metcalf, if they were playing on a team with a quarterback that went down, they would still be able to produce with the backup. Case in point, Michael Thomas did it last year with Teddy Bridgewater playing quarterback for the Saints whenever Drew Brees got hurt. So it is possible to see stuff like that happen, and the wide receivers still thrive. Amari Cooper just hasn't been the guy to do that for the Cowboys.
Right. Yeah, and that sucks for me. Obviously, I have him on my team. When Dak was playing, he wasn't doing amazing, but he was obviously doing better than 1.5 points. But that's another guy, kind of like Zeke, where just it doesn't really add up. I don't understand why he's not doing as good as he is. You'd think he's talented, but for whatever reason, just it's not equaling up. I have no idea what the issue is there, but yeah, not great at all.
Could we see McCarthy be a one and done in Dallas, or is he going to get the old benefit of the doubt because Dak got hurt?
Yeah, they're going to give him the benefit this year, but I don't think anything's going to change.
I don't think he deserves it because the Cowboys weren't setting the world on fire before Dak got hurt. They were coming from behind in every game that they played in. So
yeah, I agree. I think Jerry will just kind of let this slide. But I do not think that Mike McCarthy is the answer there. I think that was the cheap option for them to pick up. If he was that great, he would have stuck around in Green Bay and won more Super Bowls with Aaron Rodgers. There's a problem there. And I don't think that McCarthy is the answer for them at all.
I agree. What else you got today? I know we had a little bit of baseball that you wanted to talk.
Yeah. The biggest news so far in this postseason for me is that Hall of Fame manager Tony La Russa is back at the ripe old age of 76. And the Chicago White Sox have decided to name him their manager. The White Sox are a young, talented team that we're kind of talked about and potentially going far this year in the postseason. They obviously didn't, and it looks like they're trying to make a push and to get some pieces going so that they can make a push for the World Series. And this is, I guess, maybe one of their first attempts at doing so. Clearly, Tony knows how to win. He won a World Series with the A's and with the Cardinals. He's been out of the game management-wise for 10 years now. He's done some front office work, but I have to think the very first thing I think of is a 76-year-old man potentially going out for 162 games if we have a full season next year. That's a lot. And boy, I guess we'll see what he can do, but boy, that's a big ask.
And to make matters a little bit more convoluted, it was announced today by the Baseball Writers of America that Rick Renteria, the now former manager of the Chicago White Sox, was named a finalist for the AL Manager of the Year. So they fired a guy that is a finalist for Manager of the Year to hire a 76-year-old man that hasn't coached in about a decade. Kind of a weird move.
Odd choice. From what I've heard around the baseball world is that they like Tony's old school style. They want a little bit of discipline introduced in their dugout, but I don't really know how young players are going to react to that. I don't think that Tony is going to be a huge fan of the bat flips and of the celebrating and stuff like that. And that's just the way baseball is kind of turning these days. The young kids are kind of just allowed to go do their thing. You know, that saying, let the kids play is real now. And I don't know if Tony's just going to kind of shut up and just let the kids do their thing, or if he's going to have something to say about it. It might cause a rift in the dugout and do the exact opposite of what the White Sox want. Or the young players might respect the old man and just have to, you know, kind of deal with his saltiness and just listen to the advice that he gives them. I have no idea.
With the Red Sox actively in search for a manager, I'm half expecting Joe Torre's name to get mentioned every now and then.
Seriously, I don't know what the hell's going on.
But we'll cover that more as more news unfolds for that. I know they've narrowed it down to a list of potential guys. Joe Torre's not on the list, by the way, but the Yankees bench coach is. So we'll see if that happens. I know Alex Cora is back on the list as a potential manager coming back for the Red Sox. So that'll be interesting. I personally don't think that that's going to happen. I think he comes with too much baggage, and he's only on there because a lot of fans and some of the players really liked and respected Cora. But I think Chaim Bloom's going to pick his own guy. And we'll cover that more as that happens. And we'll cover more of what's going on in Major League Baseball as the offseason progresses. And as we get more into, you know, pitchers and catchers reporting in February, spring training starting, and then, you know, of course, opening day. Hopefully this whole COVID thing is over and done with by then, and we can actually have fans in the stands, because that would be great to be able to go back to a baseball game.
Yep.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think if they do kind of let the kids run free and, you know, you can pack the stands and stuff, I think you'll see record turnout at baseball games. People miss going to sports, and the second that they're allowed to, I think they're going to turn out.
I hope you're right. It would be good to see the stands packed full at, you know, some of these stadiums that you're not used to seeing with full crowds, like Tropicana, like the Miami Marlins stadium down there in Miami. You know, the Red Sox always pack the house. The Yankees always pack the house, but maybe the Blue Jays, they're not really known for sellouts there in the Rogers Center. So it'd be cool to see if everybody kind of got the bug to start going and supporting their baseball teams, because it was missed this year. It definitely was. And it's something that I personally really missed, because it was the first time that we've missed going to a game in several years. I can't even remember the last season that we didn't go to a baseball game. So
yeah, it was really tough, because we just recently moved into the city. I'm way closer to Busch Stadium now, and I was kind of we moved during quarantine, so I knew I wouldn't be able to go to a game, but it was just a thought, you know, if you live in the city, it's so easy to go to games.
Sure.
That wasn't the case this year. So yeah, I hope that people get the chance to go to sporting events more this next year. Hopefully we can just sort all this crap out. And I think that the off season for MLB is going to be very interesting, with all of the free agents and the lack of revenue that the owners have gotten. What are they going to do? You know, we've seen that the Cardinals have not taken some options for Colton Wong, and they've let Yachty for the very first time become a free agent. I think a lot of other teams are going to kind of do the same. And then there's going to be those owners that are just going to double down and say, this is our year. We're going for it. We're going to pay big money no matter what. And I think one of those might be the new Mets owner. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there has finally been one Mets owner named. I know there was a huge bidding war, I guess, with A-Rod and all that, and they finally figured out who that's going to be. And you might see those teams and those owners that want to push all in when everyone's kind of folding, and go for the big contracts and pay someone $300 million to try to win a World Series.
The Mets owner is Steve Cohen now, and he just got approved to purchase the Mets for $2.4 billion.
Yeah,
That's billion with a B, by the way.
Yeah, just a cool couple bucks.
Chump change. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for commenting along. We appreciate all of you. And, we come here every Monday night and do this for free. We don't get paid to do this. We enjoy doing it. So it's something that we both look forward to. We love talking sports and we love interacting with all of you. If you like the show, like it, subscribe, share it, tell somebody about it. We could use all the help we get because we don't really get advertising dollars or anything like that, like I said. So, all right. You got anything else you want to talk about before we go?
One last thing. Anderson the Spider Silva decided to retire this weekend. He fought Uriah Hall, lost, and decided to hang it up. So
long overdue.
Yeah, one of the absolute legends of the sport finally, like Brandon said, long overdue, decided to retire. He should have retired at least 5 years ago, but he finally did. And he when he was in his prime, he was one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah, absolutely. He was never really the same after he broke his leg. But Anderson Silva hanging him up, definitely going to be UFC Hall of Fame next chance they get, probably. So
yep,
cool for him. Kudos to a good career. But we'll be back later this week, hopefully. Hopefully, I'm trying to put something together to have a Mandalorian episode. I want to recap episode 1 and kind of give our thoughts and predictions as that series moves forward. I've been trying to line up a few guests. I've got a few that have confirmed that they would like to come on. I've just got to try to get schedules figured out and figure out when everybody can actually sit down and watch these episodes, because it seems like not everybody is watching them as soon as they drop.
Do you like that they're dropping one episode at a time, or would you rather them just drop the entire season so you can binge it?
For me personally, I would like to binge it, but for podcast purposes, I like that it's one a week, because I can watch the one, we can talk about it, and then we can get ready for the next one, and it gives us 8 weeks of content.
Yeah, I like the one at a time system that they're doing, because there's so much damn TV on and shows to watch. It's kind of nice to watch one and you can just stop and say, okay, that's it. I can kind of build my anticipation for the next episode.
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind that, but I just get in a mode where it's like, I just want to see them all now.
Right.
And, I'm sitting there like that Dave Chappelle meme, you got any more of the Mandalorian episodes?
Yep.
Anyway, we'll try to get something together for that, maybe midweek this week, to talk about episode 1, and then we'll try to get a day ironed out when we can have those episodes all season long. So stay tuned for that, and be sure that you are following on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, wherever Nest Podcast is at. We'll see you guys later. Peace.